Welcome to Mystic Realms Recap. Please like, share, and subscribe. Enjoy today's episode.
Boom. The sound was too loud. Even though sound couldn't be transmitted in the vacuum, the terrifying fluctuations produced by the collision still resounded in the minds of every living creature. Boom. The living tree that Yi Bei was entrenched in turned into powder and disappeared. Boom. Boom. Crack, crack. Countless spatial fragments appeared around Yi Bei, and the universe seemed to have collapsed. Walalala. At the same time, when the flood dragon crashed into Yi Bei, the countless vines of the living trees around him continued to rush toward him. However, in the face of such a terrifying energy fluctuation, no matter how many of them there were, they still couldn't get close. When they were more than 1,000 meters away, they had all turned into powder. The force of the impact was too great. The flood dragon had originally thought that Yi Bei would die for sure. However, when they actually collided, he was rather shocked, because the result wasn't what he had imagined. When his body collided with Yi Bei's body, the latter didn't immediately shatter into pieces. On the contrary, the flood dragon even felt a faint pain in its body the moment it collided with it. This guy, how is this possible? This low-level creature can actually withstand my attack and even make me feel pain. The flood dragon immediately thought. He had still greatly underestimated Yi Bei's strength, even though Yi Bei was only a snake right now. However, ever since he could evolve, he had devoured an unknown amount of energy. The strength of his body had even reached an unimaginable level. But, while the flood dragon was still in shock, Yi Bei wasn't having an easy time. Damn it, it hurts. This was Yi Bei's first reaction. He felt as if his body would break at any moment after being hit by the flood dragon. However, the pain made him even more excited and his eyes became even more heated. End quote. Your strength is only SOSO? Since you're here, try my attack. End quote. Yi Bei didn't hesitate. The moment its body was hit, it opened its mouth without any hesitation, and the two sharp fangs at the corner of its mouth ruthlessly bit at the flood dragon's body. The extremely fierce poison had long been accumulated. Whoosh. But, when Yi Bei bit down hard, the result greatly exceeded his expectations. There was only a chi-la sound. It was as if he had crashed into an extremely strong metal, unable to enter any further. This guy's skin is too hard, Yi Bei exclaimed in his heart. However, a large amount of venom was flowing down the dragon's teeth at the fastest speed. You're too weak. You want to use your teeth to bite me? You dirty, inferior creature. The flood dragon snapped out of its daze and roared angrily. It immediately used its two claws to grab Yi Bei. However, just as the flood dragon was waving its claws, he suddenly felt a sharp pain on his back. What was going on? How was this possible? When he realized that there was no wound on the spot where Yi Bei had bitten him, but that the venom that had flowed out of his mouth was able to cause some damage to his body, he was shocked. End quote. I thought you were really strong, and it would be difficult to even leave a wound on you. It seems that I have overestimated you. End quote. Yi Bei said coldly. After seeing the black mark corroded by the poison on the flood dragon's body, he immediately knew that this thing would definitely be effective on the flood dragon. However, just as Yi Bei finished speaking, the flood dragon was full of disdain. You want to defeat me with this kind of method? Don't be naive. I'll let you see my true strength. Roar, he growled. In the next second, the flood dragon's aura rose crazily. In just an instant, Yi Bei felt that this fellow was several times stronger than before. There was even a faint, magical luster on the surface of its body, and the corroded skin was completely restored in an instant, without a single trace. In the distance, countless three-body creatures and mutated beasts were watching the battle. End quote. He's too powerful. I feel like if he wanted to, he could easily destroy the entire centaurs. No, the entire universe. This kind of aura is unbelievable. End quote. Flood dragon. It's a godlike species. It seems like we're going to win. What we should do after the flood dragon wins. As his servants, we have to fulfill the will of our ancestors. Besides, we have no other choice. These three-body life forms were constantly communicating with each other through advanced technology. So strong. The power of a king is truly unbelievable. End quote. That's right. But that flood dragon is also. I just heard some three-body life forms say that the flood dragon came from a high-level universe, and we are now in a low-level universe. Then, could it be that all high-level universes are this kind of abnormal? How is that possible? If they were all such powerful creatures, it would have been a mess long ago. And quote, forget it. As long as we have enough time to evolve, we can also reach this level of power. By then, even if there really is a so-called high-tier universe, end quote. End quote. Ho ho, it's nothing much, but I'm sure that the meat of those high-level creatures is absolutely delicious. Moreover, after devouring it, we'll obtain more benefits. End quote. Almost all of the mutated beasts, without exception, thought that Yi Bei would be the winner. This judgment was the complete opposite of the three-bodied creatures. It was a kind of blind confidence. As for the creatures that were rushing toward the centaurs in space, they had a different view. End quote. Flood dragon, a creature from a high-level universe. Isn't it too strong? The space snake felt a chill. And that python, I remember how old it was the last time I saw it. Now his body was almost the same length as a WYRM. If he was allowed to continue evolving, wouldn't he be able to swallow the entire universe? Could it be that he doesn't have an end point for his evolution? The voice continued. The things that had happened in the universe during this period of time had truly shocked him. End quote. It seems like there's not much hope in controlling those creatures. In this situation, the only way is to find some gene fragments in the centaurs for research. Of course, our machinery race will not fail. Whether it's the dragon or the python, they're nothing to us. End quote. And NBSB, whoosh whoosh whoosh. In the depths of the universe, a few giant robots were moving forward. One of them said in a cold voice, just as all the living beings were paying close attention to this war. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World, site only. Roar. The flood dragon's body underwent another terrifying transformation as it roared. His mouth was wide open. Then, an incredible scene appeared. This guy could actually use his physical body to brew a terrifying ball of fire in his mouth. Walalala. The ball of fire was extremely huge. The moment it appeared, its diameter increased at an unbelievable speed. The ball of fire was floating in front of the flood dragon. In less than a second, its diameter had reached 10,000 meters. The temperature inside was at least 1,000,000 degrees. The moment it appeared, the shattered space fragments around it were all burned into a sea of fire. Furthermore, the flames were blue in color. Yes, blue flames. The originally dark universe was illuminated into a blue ocean, forming an extremely beautiful scenery. However, whether it was the three-body creatures or the mutated beasts, none of them would really treat this as a scenery. This flame is so terrifying. I feel that if I touch it, I will definitely die. A mutated monkey's eyes were filled with fear. End quote. I didn't expect this flood dragon to be able to breathe fire. End quote. The golden lion roared. Are we really not going to help? No matter how powerful this flood dragon is, it's just one person. If it can spew flames, so can we. And with our numbers, we can definitely burst forth with even more terrifying power. At that time, the flood dragon will be the only one to suffer a blow. Wangwen couldn't help but ask. End quote. Let's continue watching. The king's strength is definitely not inferior. His strength is beyond our imagination. End quote. Caesar was very determined. End quote. I have the urge to let my army of ants completely cover that flood dragon and then devour it. End quote. The queen ant made a rare sound, and its tone was full of expectation. However, just as he finished speaking, he was ruthlessly interrupted by Blood Moon. End quote. The worm dragon is the king's food. Without his orders, even if we defeat him, it will be useless. Remember, keep the king at his strongest. This is our ultimate goal as apostles. Yes. Yes. As soon as he finished speaking, the apostle shuddered. Although he wanted to eat better food to evolve, it had already become an instinct by now. However, there were some things that could never be forgotten, and they couldn't be said casually. Hence, the mutated beasts continued to watch the battle. Of course, during this period, most of the mutated beasts were still devouring the three-body life forms crazily. After all, the energy obtained from each bite could significantly improve their strength. This feeling was even better than taking drugs. In space, Yibei narrowed his eyes and looked at the flood dragon, which had a huge flame in its mouth. He was also very surprised. At first, I thought that the abilities I obtained were impossible for living beings to possess. It seems like I was too naive. When a living being reaches a certain level, technology is not worth mentioning at all. However, what happens when technology reaches the peak? Just thinking about it makes me look forward to it. Chi. Yibei muttered to himself as he stuck out his forked tongue. Roar. However, in the next second, he growled and started to use his fire-breathing ability without hesitation. During this period of time, he had devoured so much energy. His body had reached 20,000 meters, and his various abilities had improved to an unprecedented level. Yibei was confident that his strength was not necessarily inferior to that flood dragon. Roar. Roar. He kept growling. He opened his mouth. A pitch-black fireball instantly appeared in his mouth. Chi. Then, the fireball grew at an incredible speed, reaching more than 5,000 meters in the blink of an eye. You've really exceeded my expectations. No wonder those trashy three-body life forms didn't have the strength to deal with you. It seems that they didn't lose in vain. When the flood dragon saw Yi Bei's condition, a terrifying mental power fluctuation emanated from its body. Those fluctuations immediately transformed into a language that Yi Bei could understand, and they resounded in his head. Roar. However, Yi Bei didn't answer. It might not be a bad idea to test his ultimate strength with this flood dragon. Roar. When the fireball in front of him had also reached a diameter of 10,000 meters, Yi Bei didn't hold back. He roared, and in the next second, the black fireball slowly charged towards the flood dragon. It was the same for the blue fireball of the flood dragon. And quote, what terrifying energy, and quote. He's too strong. If these two balls of flames collide, the shock wave will be unimaginable. The mutated beasts and the three-bodied creatures were all stunned at this moment. However, they quickly reacted and ran away as fast as they could. They knew very well that if they were to be hit by this power, they might die on the spot. 1 second, 2 seconds. The two giant fireballs were slowly clashing with each other. It was not fast. However, all of the living beings knew that an attack of this level had nothing to do with speed, because there was no way to dodge it. 3 seconds. And NBSB, Hong Long Long. Finally, the two fireballs collided together. The moment they collided, the temperature of this space suddenly increased more than 100 times. Moreover, the entire outer space became extremely quiet in an instant. In the eyes of all the living beings, they were all different scenes. The black and blue fireballs intertwined, and layers of terrifying fluctuations burst out from the intersection. The surrounding space collapsed madly, and the terrifying energy produced was almost comparable to the explosion of a star. Behind these two fireballs, a terrifying black hole was formed. I found an opponent. You're very strong. The moment the fireball collided with it, the worm dragon's contemptuous tone finally subsided a little, and its eyes gradually became serious. Yi Bei was a little surprised. To be honest, he was already prepared for the next attack. But he didn't expect that the flames he used with all his strength could really block the flood dragon's flames. And quote, looks like I've overestimated this fellow's strength. Fire is only one of my abilities, and with my current strength, I can even use it more than 100 times in a day. How many times can this worm dragon use it? Yi Bei secretly thought to himself. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World, site only. Roar. As soon as he finished speaking, the two balls of fire collided in space. Yi Bei's body decisively left the protection of the living tree and charged towards the flood dragon. At that moment, Yi Bei's entire attention was on the flood dragon. He didn't notice that the moment he went over, the living tree in space that had reached 1.5 million meters tall was undergoing other changes. Countless roots writhed crazily as they quietly pierced into the two terrifying flames, secretly absorbing the boundless energy. The living tree was a product inadvertently created by a group of human scientists during the era of human civilization. Moreover, the living trees at that time were all unconscious. They were only entrenched in one area of Research Island, fighting with each other and living a difficult life. Ever since she had met Yi Bei, Only after the path of evolution had begun did these living trees begin to show their terrifying power. Infinite reproduction. It could increase infinitely. He only needed water and enough energy. Even Yi Bei was extremely shocked by the power he displayed. In fact, at this moment, the living tree was madly absorbing the energy generated from Yi Bei's battle with the flood dragon. It was also unbelievable. But, in any case, Yi Bei had already formed a close connection with all the living trees after passing through the forest of death. In fact, he could even completely control the living trees with a single thought. Therefore, the stronger these living trees became, the better it would be for Yi Bei. There were no disadvantages to this. End quote. You've been attacking me several times in a row. Now it's my turn to try? End quote. Yi Bei was ready to take the initiative. Crackling. Roar. After saying this, he opened his mouth again and let out a low roar. Immediately after, a ball of pitch-black flames appeared in his mouth once again. However, this time, the flames had a special effect. Within the pitch-black flames, countless silver-white lightning bolts flickered. This ball of flame had just appeared, but it already carried an aura that could destroy the world. It was unknown how many times stronger it was than before. Roar. The flood dragon's reaction speed was also extremely fast. When the two flames were evenly matched, he was indeed surprised. However, he quickly reacted. However, when he saw Yi Bei once again release a powerful flame, and even saw lightning within it, he was even more surprised. End quote. Low-level universes have always been limited by the laws of the universe due to the lack of resources. It's extremely difficult for them to advance. This guy seems to be evolving towards a higher life form. It's unbelievable. End quote. This time, the flood dragon became serious. He let out such a low voice. However, his body remained in space without any movement. His cold eyes were fixed on Yi Bei. No matter how the scorching aura in the surrounding space spread wildly, his body continued to release a cold aura. The temperature could not cause him any harm at all. End quote. After I get rid of this guy, I'll think of a way to return to my universe. I have to tell them about the situation here. Maybe I can atone for my mistakes and not fuss about them. End quote. Whoosh. After thinking about this, the flood dragon's body shook and turned into a blue shadow. It actually took the initiative to charge in the direction of the black fireball Yi Bei had created. In the distance, the three body life forms were all excited when they saw this. End quote. Although the flame is terrifying, it's still too weak for your excellency flood dragon to rush in directly with your body. This kind of strength is simply terrifying. I think that python is dead for sure. End quote. Right? I'm certain that this flood dragon didn't even use 1/10 of its true strength. How strong is he? We used to be his servants. Don't forget how powerful he is to make us three-bodied creatures his servants. At the very least, I can be sure that he can easily and even instantly destroy us three-body beings with his strength. The three-body creatures were excited. However, fear was also growing. Today, no matter who won, the centaurs would be completely finished. The three-body life forms did not have a good ending either. At the very least, there was no doubt about that. To the mutated beasts, it was another situation. The flood dragon is getting anxious. End quote. He actually took the initiative to charge into King's attack. That idiot. End quote. End quote. I don't understand. If the king agrees for us to attack together and shoot out flames or use other abilities together, I don't think any life form can resist our attacks when there are trillions of them, right? We'll know when we see. End quote. The king has many abilities. I think the king is just testing his own power. End quote. The mutated beasts said one after another. Her heart was beating faster. His eyes were filled with anticipation. In their opinion, Yi Bei wouldn't lose. The battle that they were about to witness might be able to improve their strength. But, at this moment, Caesar narrowed his eyes. At first, he had been completely focused on Yi Bei and the flood dragon, but when he inadvertently glanced at the living tree, he immediately sucked in a breath of cold air. In his line of sight, the living tree was entrenched in space, and its body length had reached 1.5 million meters. Perhaps it was small compared to a planet. However, the aura that he was exuding right now was extremely terrifying. The roots were uncountable, constantly twisting in the universe. The energy produced by the various explosions around them all madly gathered in the direction of the living tree. And the living tree swallowed them all without any hesitation. End quote. This living tree is really terrifying. However, the king has yet to truly use its power. Once he does, that flood dragon will definitely be dead. End quote. Caesar said in a hoarse voice as he took a deep breath. Moreover, the living tree was not only absorbing energy. The entire tree was covered in extremely bright flowers. It was extremely fast. Judging from the current situation, it would only take a few minutes for the flowers to turn into fruits and completely spread out in the centaurs. Caesar, who had a certain understanding of the universe tree, was more and more shocked the more he thought about it. Other than the living tree, Caesar also knew that the king had another great killing weapon that he had not taken out. It was the super rainbow battleship that had shocked the beast god civilization on Earth. So, at this moment, Caesar had absolute confidence in eBay. Roar! The flood dragon roared again and again. As he charged towards eBay, he opened his mouth, revealing all his sharp teeth. Whoosh! Read latest chapters at Wuxia World, site only. The speed was too fast. In just an instant, this fellow broke through the ball of flames that eBay had condensed and headed straight for eBay. Just as the water dragon was about to collide with eBay again, the space in countless places in the entire Centaur constellation shattered madly. The energy was too terrifying, as if it could blow up the entire galaxy at any moment. Boom, boom, boom. Under this energy, many of the three-body life forms suspended in space exploded due to the spatial fluctuations. The entire universe was filled with this violent energy. Go to hell, you lowly creature. The flood dragon was furious. It was as if Yi Bei had ruthlessly provoked her dignity as a high-level creature. With a low growl, his body pierced through the flames and headed straight for Yi Bei's head. Are flames useless? Even with the addition of lightning, he still couldn't stop the flood dragon. Yi Bei couldn't help but feel rather surprised. However, he quickly calmed down. If he could stop the flood dragon with just these flames, it would be too easy. After all, it was a high-level creature. At that moment, Yi Bei's fighting spirit instantly soared to the extreme. His eyes narrowed. Their bodies were coiled together. The sharp spines on his back formed circles of sharp defensive castles when he was coiled up. It was as if anything that came into contact with it would be cut into dozens of pieces. But Yi Bei knew very well that this was far from enough. When he saw the flood dragon charging at him, he could clearly feel the terrifying life force contained in the flood dragon's body. It was extremely majestic. End quote. Not bad. No wonder I didn't need to go through all the small stages to evolve from a sky-devouring python to a worm dragon. If I devour a creature like you, I can completely replenish all my resources. I'm really looking forward to the moment I evolve into a worm dragon. End quote. Chi. Yi Bei flicked his tongue. His eyes had turned from black to blood red. Swish, swish. When the flood dragon was less than 1,000 meters away from Yi Bei moved. Several dark red beams of death light shot out of his scarlet eyes, carrying an extremely terrifying aura. Tap, 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 tap. However, when the death rays hit the flood dragon, it was like a stone hitting an iron plate. It only made a tapping sound. End quote. It's useless. How can such a low-level method cause me any harm? The flood dragon's voice was filled with disdain. Boom. As soon as he finished speaking, his body finally slammed into Yi Bei's body, creating a loud bang. But this time, the result was beyond the flood dragon's expectations. How is this possible? Yi Bei wasn't smashed into pieces as he had expected. In fact, he didn't even retreat. That pair of cold eyes was staring at him coldly, making him feel an unprecedented sense of danger. End quote. System, logically speaking, I have the ability to swallow without limit. Pythons can easily swallow things that are several times larger than their own bodies. Now, this flood dragon's body is only 20,000 meters long. If I were to directly swallow it, no matter how strong its body is, no matter how indestructible it is, and no matter how terrifying its power is, it would instantly become nutrients for my body, right? Yi Bei stared at the flood dragon as he quickly communicated with the system in his mind. At this moment, He thought of an extremely crazy method. The flood dragon was indeed very powerful. In fact, its creature rank far exceeded Yibei's. However, the flood dragon's body was only so big. If he found an opportunity to devour it directly, it would be useless no matter how powerful he was, right? As expected, the system quickly answered Yibei's question. And quote, "Of course, host. The system can swallow anything and directly transform it into the purest energy. As long as the host can swallow it, even if it's only a part, it will be digested immediately." End quote. All right. When he heard the system's answer, Yibei's eyes were immediately filled with confidence. When those eyes looked at the flood dragon, they really just treated him as a delicious meal. And Yibei's gaze made the flood dragon very unhappy. "Go to hell. Roar." The roar continued. Crack, crack, crack. The space around Yibei's body shattered madly. Some of the spaces even shattered the moment they came into contact with Yibei's body, causing his body to shatter. But with Yibei's current strength, he would recover completely in the blink of an eye after his body was shattered. He was basically an undying and indestructible existence. It's still not certain who will die. Flood Dragon, to be honest, I really want to try you. His body was constantly being hit by terrifying impacts. At this moment, Yibei unceremoniously opened his mouth wide. It stuck out its scarlet forked tongue, and its entire body emitted a terrifying killing intent. I'm going to devour you. Boom. The moment they collided again, Yibei let out this extremely cold voice. The flood dragon's body trembled. He was very confident. But at this time, for some reason, he felt a chill in his heart and even a sense of uneasiness. What's going on? This shouldn't be the case. The flood dragon thought to himself. However, his body did not stop. Chi chi chi. The two bodies collided, and the sizzling sound continued. Boom boom boom. At the same time, the terrifying energy produced by the collision in the surrounding universe exploded with an even more terrifying sound. We won. That monster didn't even have the power to resist. It was all the flood dragons attacking. As long as we kill him, the other monsters will be easy to deal with. He's so strong. This tells us that just the size of our bodies is far from enough. Our three bodies are big, right? However, who would dare to go against that flood dragon? Its roar can tear through space. If we're even slightly hit, we'll definitely die. A three-body being said. MMH. However, after he said that, the atmosphere suddenly became a little strange. A three-body life form would be finished on the spot if it was hit. But now, Yibei had been struck by the flood dragon at least 10 times. And yet, nothing had happened to Yibei, and he was still alive and well. And quote, "I can't believe it. That guy is too terrifying. He evolved to this stage right under our eyes, and his strength is increasing crazily with every moment." End quote. End quote. The flood dragon is indeed very powerful, and the monster is also very terrifying. End quote. At this point, the three-body creatures fell silent. They even regretted provoking the solar system and the creatures on Earth. If things continued to develop like this, regardless of whether the flood dragon or Yibei won, the entire tri-body civilization would be completely doomed. After all, they had dominated the universe for tens of thousands of years. Such an outcome was really hard to accept. The three-body creatures were in a panic. However, the mutated beasts were extremely excited at this moment. When Yibei said that he was going to devour them, all the mutated beasts heard him through their mental domain. At that moment, their eyes lit up. That's right. Flood dragons were indeed invincible. However, it couldn't withstand the devouring. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World, site only. As long as he took a bite, even if he couldn't bite through it, as long as it entered his mouth, it would turn into energy. Just thinking about it was enough to make him happy. Roar. Just as the eyes of the mutated beasts lit up, a loud noise was heard. Yibei opened his mouth. With his 20,000-meter-long body, Yibei now looked even more terrifying when he opened his mouth. It was dangerous. The moment Yibei opened his mouth, the crazily charging flood dragon finally felt that something was wrong, and its eyes were filled with horror. He had absolute confidence in his own strength. In his eyes, Yibei was nothing more than a snake, a lowly creature. But this feeling of danger was definitely not wrong. What was going on? The flood dragon roared in its heart. Pucci. Just as he couldn't figure it out, there was a sudden burst of pain. It was as if a piece of flesh had been bitten off. This. Buzz. Feeling the pain, the flood dragon immediately turned its head. Then, he saw an unbelievable scene. She saw Yibei open his mouth wide, and the moment she bumped into him, he ruthlessly bit down on her body. Then, he actually bit off a piece of flesh from her body, causing her to be drenched in blood. Impossible. That's impossible. My body has always been indestructible. How could that guy's teeth possibly bite through it? The flood dragon growled in a low voice, and its body began to tremble slightly for me. However, it was only for an instant. His bitten body instantly returned to its original state, as if there was no problem. This scene, the three-bodied creatures and the mutated beasts in the distance could see everything clearly. However, the two different civilizations still had completely different perspectives when they looked at problems. For example, the three-body life forms were all shocked when they saw this scene. Invincible. This flood dragon had a piece of flesh bitten off, but it recovered instantly. Just this ability alone is heaven-defying enough. It's an existence that can't be killed. This kind of recovery ability is simply terrifying. It seems that the python is finished. Such voices continued to be heard. The mutated beasts were also talking. He bit off a piece of meat. I wonder how it will taste. I'm so envious. Roar, roar, roar. The golden lion's hair stood on end as it was filled with anticipation. End quote. I found a good way to eat meat forever, and it can guarantee that our entire snake civilization will no longer be short of food in the future. All creatures will be able to eat their fill, and the meat will be extremely delicious and powerful. End quote. Wang Wen flicked his tongue and said in a serious tone, "What is it?" Caesar was a little curious. "It's very simple. Didn't you see it just now?" The king clearly bit off a piece of meat from that flood dragon, and then it instantly recovered. If we capture this flood dragon alive and imprison it, we'll have to cut off its meat every day. Since it recovers quickly, it'll be an inexhaustible superfood. Wang Wen's eyes were shining when he said this. "You're thinking too much. Continue to watch." Caesar shook his head. He was very clear that the law of conservation of energy was very accurate. If he wanted the flood dragon to recover continuously, he had to store up enough energy. Otherwise, there would always be a limit, and it would die from energy exhaustion one day. Many of the creatures continued to watch. The flood dragon was shocked. Yibei, on the other hand, was in a completely different situation. After devouring a mouthful of flood dragon meat, his body underwent an extremely terrifying transformation. The majestic energy spread through his entire body through his mouth. At this moment, the system's voice rang out in his mind. "Congratulations, host, for successfully devouring a portion of the worm dragon gene. Currently, your body is fusing with that gene. The more you devour, the faster the fusion will be. The evolution into a worm dragon is just around the corner." The system's voice was full of temptation. When Yibei looked at the flood dragon, his eyes began to glow green. "Your meat tastes pretty good. It's very satisfying to eat." Yibei stared at the flood dragon. He allowed the energy in his body to continue to increase, and his voice carried a hint of ridicule. The system was right. He was very strong, and this flood dragon might be very strong, but it was really uncertain who would win. "You are really looking for death." The flood dragon was furious. That feeling of uneasiness made him very unhappy, especially when this kind of feeling appeared in a low-level universe. His eyes turned scarlet red at this moment. Chi. The four claws were all emitting extremely sharp thorns, and his body was no longer in the state of collision, and he was directly pushed back several thousand meters. Half of his body was coiled up in the void. The other half of his body was standing tall, and he was looking down at Yibei and NBSB, whoosh. His body also released an extremely terrifying aura, which was tens of times stronger than before, even though they were of different races. To other creatures, the worm dragon was no different from a monster, but it gave them the illusion that it was extremely noble. Yes, it was noble. He simply occupied it like this. It was as if they were from an extremely noble race, exuding the aura of nobility from head to toe. Sacred. Great. It was inviolable. At this moment, the three-body creature and the mutated beasts who were watching the battle from afar could feel a strange aura. It was as if he wanted to submit from the bottom of his heart. What's going on? Why do I feel like that guy is the real noble, even prostrating himself on the ground? Golden Lion gritted his teeth and his eyes started to turn red. Me too. It's too strange, this feeling. Wangwen replied. Mental power? It doesn't seem like it. He clearly didn't release any spiritual energy. Caesar didn't understand. As for the three-body life forms, they had thrown away all their dignity at this moment. On the surface of their bodies, all kinds of characters were dancing wildly. And at the fastest speed, it was transformed into words. Lord, Divine Flood Dragon, Dragon God. These voices carried a hint of prayer, and all of them came from the depths of their hearts. As for this moment, when Yibei saw the flood dragon coiled high up in the sky, he also realized that something was amiss. This fellow seemed to have changed in an instant. Even Yibei himself felt that the flood dragon had suddenly become so high that it was impossible to reach. There was clearly not much change in his aura. System, what's going on? This was the first time he had encountered such a situation, so he couldn't help but ask the system. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World, site only. And finally, after the flood dragon coiled up, it did not continue to attack. She simply looked at Yibei indifferently, as if she was looking down on all life, which made Yibei rather displeased. But at that moment, Yibei realized that his will to fight was rapidly dissipating. Just as Yibei was still trying to figure out what was going on, the system's voice finally rang out after a second of hesitation. Strange. It was too strange. Almost all the creatures in the Centaur constellation subconsciously had the urge to submit to the flood dragon. End quote. The worm dragon is a high-level creature recognized by the laws of the universe. When facing low-level creatures, it has a natural aura. This is very normal. From another perspective, a person who has been in a high position for a long time will have this aura. If he is facing a poor person, he will make the poor person yield. This is the situation now. End quote. The system's explanation made a lot of sense. I know. Yibei's eyes narrowed. This flood dragon was really interesting. It was actually trying to exert pressure on Yibei with this kind of aura. After understanding what was going on, the feeling of suppression was instantly dispelled. End quote. It seems like I have to use my strongest power. End quote. Chi. He stuck out his forked tongue and spoke in a low voice. As he spoke, he stared at the flood dragon. At that moment, the flood dragon hovering in the air slowly opened its mouth. Its voice was extremely arrogant, and its eyes were boundless as it fixed its gaze on Yibei. Inferior creature, it seems that if I don't take this seriously, I'll really be underestimated by you. Today, I'll let you experience what it means to be a creature from a truly advanced civilization. Roar. A low roar. Crack, crack. The surrounding universe shattered crazily again. Sound couldn't be transmitted in the vacuum, but all the creatures could clearly hear the crisp sound of cracking. Walala. At the same time, blue flames began to burn on the flood dragon's body. The temperature of the flames was at least hundreds of millions of degrees. Many of the shattered spatial fragments were burned to ashes the moment they came into contact with the flames and disappeared completely. These flames were many times more powerful than the flames Yibei had just released. Even the three-body creatures and mutated beasts that were hiding far away felt a deep threat when they faced this temperature. How terrifying. End quote. Just this extreme temperature alone can turn our bodies into the steam of the universe. End quote. End quote. His body isn't very big, but the energy he needs to release this kind of terrifying high-energy heat is terrifying. Moreover, his body can withstand this temperature, which is enough to prove that he is not an ordinary body. End quote. End quote. What kind of creature can withstand such temperature? With our current knowledge, we can't be sure. At this moment, all the pride of the three-body life forms was completely shattered. Not long ago, they had firmly believed that the tri-body civilization was definitely the highest level of existence in this universe. The so-called beast god civilization couldn't even withstand a single blow. Even the space snake and the machinery race didn't dare to provoke them. However, the appearance of the flood dragon made them finally understand what a truly high-level civilization and high-level creatures were. At that moment, the mutated beasts were also shocked by the temperature of the water dragon. That guy has become the sun, a blue sun. No matter what, that flood dragon is truly terrifying. This aura is too terrifying. As long as I get close, I'll definitely die. King, can you win? And quote, let's continue watching. Right. Don't forget to devour as well. Absorb as much energy as you can and become stronger. If the king needs it, we can help him and not be a burden. End quote. Countless mutated beasts said. Yibei's expression was indeed very serious. To be honest, the power that the flood dragon had displayed far exceeded Yibei's expectations. Just the fact that it could raise his body temperature to such a high temperature was already terrifying enough. But this wasn't a reason for Yibei to back down. After Yibei's state of mind recovered, the fighting spirit in his body became even stronger. At the same time, Yibei felt a huge change in his body. The genes of flood dragons were extremely powerful. Although he had only swallowed a mouthful of the genes, after they entered his blood, they continued to attack the firm chains. Every time a chain broke and reassembled, Yibei could feel his body grow stronger, and even his blood began to become purer. This change made Yibei drool even more at the flood dragon's meat in front of him. Other than this temperature, what other methods do you have? Let's use them all at once. Chi. Yibei sat there, unmoving. There was still a certain distance between him and the flood dragon, and that kind of temperature wasn't enough to cause Yibei any harm at the moment. So, Yibei once again ridiculed him without holding back. Are you looking for death? Its body released a terrifying heat, and the flood dragon no longer hesitated. With a blue glow, it charged fiercely towards Yibei. End quote. Inferior creature, I'm already disdainful of eating you. I'll directly turn you into dust in the universe and destroy your soul. End quote. As it rushed over, the flood dragon let out a terrifying roar. Furthermore, his speed far exceeded the speed of light. They weren't very far from Yibei to begin with, and at this speed, they arrived in front of Yibei in the blink of an eye. Yibei knew very well that the flood dragon was serious this time. The amount of energy it consumed to make its body burst out with such a terrifying heat was also extremely terrifying. The flood dragon definitely wanted to end the battle as soon as possible, so it launched its most violent attack. End quote. It seems that I can only use the Serpent God battleship that was opened from the Diamond Treasure Chest. That's a battleship from a high-tier universe. If I'm not wrong, it can definitely defeat this dragon. End quote. Yibei's killing intent rose. He had wanted to devour the dragon, but he couldn't get close at all. If he used the Serpent God battleship, he might make the dragon disappear completely. End quote. Forget it. I've already devoured the flood dragon's genes anyway. As long as I have enough time, I can let those genes multiply infinitely, and I can still evolve into a flood dragon. As for energy, after I defeat this guy, all the three-bodied creatures in the entire Centaur constellation will become food. End quote. He also flicked his tongue. At this thought, a twisted vortex appeared in the void. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World, site only. Then, the Serpent God battleship appeared out of thin air. As for Yibei, he disappeared into thin air, and in the next second, he appeared in the battleship's control room. Crack, crack, crack. The flood dragon's speed was too fast. Unfortunately, when he rushed to Yibei's previous location, tore the space apart, and burned everything to ashes, Yibei had already disappeared. When the flood dragon finally reacted and saw the Serpent God battleship floating in the air, his body froze on the spot. How is this possible? Seeing the Serpent God battleship come out, the flood dragon was stunned and shocked. He clearly recognized this battleship. The seven-colored metal warship. These metals were all made from the toughest metals from the high-tier universes. They were driven by the purest water and were very powerful weapons even in the high-tier universes. There were even several weapons that could pose a threat to him. Why would such a warship appear here? Don't tell me they're here. Seeing the warship, the flood dragon's eyes were filled with fear. It even wanted to escape by space jump. However, at this time, the three-body creatures did not realize how terrifying the warship was. On the contrary, when the warship came out, the three-bodied creatures began to mock it crazily without exception. End quote. Ha ha ha, is that monster an idiot? He wants to use a warship to deal with the flood dragon? Using firearms? How childish. And quote, this battleship does look powerful, but it's just a pile of metal. The dragon's roar can shatter space. I don't think this battleship can last more than a second. End quote. It seems that the monster was scared silly. Almost all the three-body creatures were mocking him. However, the mutated beast's eyes lit up when they saw the warship. They had seen the power of the warship several times before. King, it's time for real. What are they doing? So scary. How powerful. End quote. Did you see that? That flood dragon seems to have been scared silly. End quote. The mutated beasts were full of confidence. As for Yi Bei, he was currently standing in the control room of the Serpent God battleship. Kai Lin's 3D projection was right next to Yi Bei. As Yi Bei's appearance changed, Kai Lin's body also underwent a massive transformation. Her body's length, joints, eyes, and nose were all in their most perfect state. However, Yi Bei couldn't appreciate any of this. After all, it was impossible for a human's memory to be truly erased from his bones. Master, should we continue to attack the flood dragon? End quote. What's wrong? Kai Lin asked as soon as she appeared. Her voice was filled with emotion and was not mechanical. End quote. Can the serpent god defeat the flood dragon? Yi Bei narrowed his eyes. The serpent god could be considered Yi Bei's greatest reliance. End quote. Of course, the serpent god is a high-grade warship. Although the WRM's biological level is very high, it will still lose when faced with the attack of such a warship. End quote. Kai Lin was very confident. After hearing this answer, Yi Bei heaved a long sigh of relief. It seemed that this warship was really a terrifying thing. The items from the diamond treasure chest were indeed very powerful. End quote. Then, let's crush him. This guy is very difficult to deal with. End quote. Without any hesitation, Yi Bei flicked out his forked tongue and commanded in a cold voice. He wanted to see the flood dragon die with his own eyes. Yes, Master, Kai Lin replied. The serpent god battleship was suspended in the void. After the order was given, a large number of cannons appeared on the body of the battleship. If one were to count them carefully, there were more than 1,000 cannons. A sizzling sound could be heard coming from each of the cannons as terrifying energy was being compressed. The warship used a pure water source. Hydrogen ions and oxygen ions collided, burned, turned back into water, and then repeated this change. In 1 second, this transformation had reached hundreds of millions of times. Buzz, buzz. Soon, white balls of light appeared in front of the cannons. The light ball was flickering with flames and lightning. When it appeared, the space around it turned into dust, becoming a black hole that devoured everything. Not good. What kind of weapon is this? I've never seen it before. It's only in the storage state, but it's able to destroy space? To create so many small black holes out of thin air. How much energy was needed to do this? This warship doesn't seem to be an ordinary warship. I have an uneasy feeling. If that ball of light hits me, I think I'll die without a doubt. The three-body creatures that were mocking him were all stunned at this moment. Countless runes were jumping wildly on the surface of their bodies. Their voices were filled with unprecedented fear. As for the flood dragon, it was so frightened that its body was trembling. Blue light. However, when faced with the serpent god, they could not use any of their strength or attack methods. His eyes were wide open and bloodshot, and he couldn't help but retreat. Damn it. This guy isn't even a creature from this universe. To be able to get such a warship, could it be from a higher universe? He's been pretending from the start. The flood dragon thought of an extremely terrifying matter. At the same time, when he thought of this and saw the destructive white energy ball, he didn't dare to stay any longer. And MBSB, whoosh whoosh whoosh. A large number of vortexes immediately appeared around his body as he tried to escape into them. Bastard, you've really hidden yourself well. If I have the chance in the future, I'll definitely kill you. Before he ran, this guy was still growling. Those sounds were mixed with powerful sound waves and spiritual energy fluctuations. Whether it was the three-body life form or the mutated beasts, they all heard it clearly. However, when the three-body creatures heard this, they were all dumbfounded. This flood dragon can't be thinking of escaping, right? What's the meaning of this? Will there be a chance in the future? What is that monster hiding? Countless questions arose from the three-body creatures. But at that moment, in the control room of the Serpent God battleship, Yi Bei's gaze turned even colder when he heard those words. Kai Lin, that fellow can directly jump through space and even hide in spatial fragments. Are you sure that these weapons can kill him? Yi Bei asked very seriously. Of course. The weapon this time is called the space-shattering cannon. It contains a huge amount of energy that can shatter a space of about 1 square meter into billions of pieces. It's countless times smaller than Ember, and this kind of attack can instantly destroy the space fragments. As long as it locks onto the target, it's useless even if it jumps through space. Kai Lin was extremely confident. When Yi Bei heard this answer, he immediately felt relieved. Boom. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World, site only. It could store energy very quickly. When the energy of the light balls reached their peak, they shot towards the flood dragon. And NBSB, Hong Long Long. A deafening sound shook the entire universe. The flood dragon wanted to escape by jumping through space, but it was too slow. When the light balls hit its body, its extremely solid body exploded on the spot and turned into a bloody mist. At the last moment, its eyes were full of despair. Boom, boom, boom. Serpent God's space-shattering cannon was too terrifying. Wherever the light balls passed, all the space was destroyed into black holes. Moreover, the black holes continued to expand and erode the surrounding space. As for the flood dragon, just a moment ago, it was still in an invincible posture, but after being attacked by the light ball, its body exploded, turning into a bloody light that filled the sky. One could even see countless sparkling and translucent spots of light scattering in the universe. In the distance, the three-body creatures and the mutated beasts were all stunned by the scene. This was especially true for the three-body creatures. The flood dragon is dead. How is this possible? He devoured the entire planet in the crystallized space. That enormous amount of energy. No way. That battleship is so powerful. End quote. Impossible. Flood dragons are high-level life forms. End quote. That battleship is indeed extraordinary. When these voices were spoken, their tone was filled with endless fear. As for the mutated beasts, seeing the flood dragon turn into light and disappear, they all cheered. End quote. We won, ho ho ho. I knew it. The king would never lose. End quote. End quote. That battleship is really powerful. I'm more and more certain that the king must have a very high-level bloodline, and even the king came from a high-level universe. Otherwise, how could he have so many abilities and such a battleship? End quote. It's good that we won. These three-body life forms are all our food. End quote. I'm going to eat my fill today. All the mutated beasts were shouting in excitement. However, the mutated beasts soon discovered something else. End quote. Quick, the whole universe is now filled with the light spots produced by the dragon's explosion. His genes are very powerful, and the explosion didn't destroy all his genes. Everyone, quickly devour the light spots and you'll immediately obtain incomparably powerful strength and even evolve. End quote. It was unknown who had said these words so selflessly. Then, a large number of mutated beasts began to chase after the light spots in the universe. After they devoured it, they discovered that they had actually obtained a wisp of the worm dragon's gene. The moment the powerful gene was devoured, it immediately began to transform their bodies. The effect it brought was even more than swallowing an entire three-body life. Whoosh! Wang Wen's reaction speed was extremely fast. After knowing that those light spots were effective, he immediately rushed into the universe, then opened his mouth and swallowed a few in one bite. Then, something magical happened. Wang Wen immediately realized that his body had undergone a huge change. Those light spots were all turned into pure energy, especially the genes inside. As soon as they entered his mouth, they immediately transformed into sharp swords, cutting off the gene chains in his body one by one and then reassembling them. Who? At this moment, Wang Wen realized that his power was increasing rapidly. The Golden Lion, Caesar, the Ant Queen. Even some of the humans who had survived and evolved were frantically searching for the light spots in the universe to devour. They didn't even care about the dense black holes in the universe. Inside the Serpent God, Yibei was stunned for a long time when he saw the flood dragon die in the explosion. Speaking of which, the result and speed were completely beyond his imagination. However, Yibei quickly reacted. This was because Kai Lin's words had resounded in his ears. Master, that flood dragon has been completely destroyed by the space-shattering cannon. Its body has been turned into countless space fragments by the cannonballs. However, the flood dragon's body is a body that has devoured endless energy. Each of its cells is like a large nuclear reactor, and each of its gene chains are unbreakable. Those are, in fact, the combination of the worm dragon's genes and cells. Creatures at his level can't be destroyed from the cells to the genetic lock. Kai Lin replied. In fact, at this moment, Yibei, who was entrenched in the control room, looked like he was in space through the holographic projection. Those light spots seemed to be constantly passing by him. In fact, Yibei could even clearly sense the terrifying energy contained within the light. Yibei had originally felt very regretful about the fact that the flood dragon had been reduced to dust. But at this moment, when he saw that the entire universe of the centaurs was filled with those light spots, and then saw the countless mutated beasts rushing over and madly fighting to devour them, he nodded in satisfaction. End quote. End quote. It seems like I've made a huge contribution to the entire snake tribe civilization this time. End quote. Master, then, do you need my help next? Kai Lin asked. No more. Chi. As soon as Yibei finished speaking, a huge vortex immediately appeared in the void of the universe. The battleship, Serpent God, which had been floating in the air, had completely disappeared. In its place was a massive golden body that was 20,000 meters long. But at this time, Yibei didn't realize that, because he had swallowed a piece of flood dragon meat, the color of his body was quietly changing. A faint tinge of blue could be seen in the dazzling gold. It made Yibei look even more noble, even more powerful, and his biological aura was several times stronger. Shwa. When the battleship disappeared and Yibei reappeared in space, countless mutated beasts' eyes all focused on him. As for the surrounding three-body life forms, some of them secretly released their powers and wanted to use the miniature wormholes to escape. Some of them were directly scared silly and stood rooted to the ground, not knowing how to move for a long time. At this moment, the system's voice finally rang out again. Yibei's eyes lit up when he heard the voice. Host, congratulations on obtaining the worm dragon gene. The genes from earlier have all proliferated and can be fully integrated at any time. Host has obtained the qualifications to evolve into a worm dragon. You can now find a safe place to undergo self-evolution. The system's voice was filled with excitement. Hearing this voice, he was even more excited. He had never thought that he would be able to evolve into a worm dragon so quickly. But, read latest chapters at Wuxia World, site only. Just as Yibei was about to immediately enter the forest of death to undergo his evolution, the three-bodied creatures in the distance finally couldn't stand the terrifying atmosphere. There was a large number of characters throbbing on the surface of the three-body life form. Those runes gathered to form a voice that Yibei and all the mutated beasts could understand. End quote. Life form from the Milky Way, the three-body civilization is willing to surrender. I hope that there will be no more fighting. End quote. He surrendered immediately, which surprised all the mutated beasts, the three-body being surrendered immediately. This was indeed very unexpected. They were a level 10 civilization, and it was a 10th grade life form. They were much stronger than the snake tribe civilization in every aspect. But now, before the three-body life forms from the Milky Way could return, they actually took the initiative to surrender. This shout made the centaurs completely silent. At this moment, the light spots in the universe had been completely devoured by the army of hundreds of billions of mutated beasts. The huge amount of energy directly prompted all the mutated beasts to evolve, and their biological levels increased crazily. From another perspective, it was understandable for the three-bodied being to surrender. After all, they had sacrificed the crystal planet and revived their ancient master, the flood dragon, but they were still easily defeated. Although their life level was high, the mutated beasts were like their nemesis. How could they fight against them? If they did not surrender, as time passed, There would only be one outcome for the three-body civilization. They would all become food. But at this time, it was up to the mutated beasts to accept their surrender. Roar, roar, roar. The first one to quit was Golden Lion. This fellow was now more than 500 meters tall, and when it lay in the air, it looked like a huge mountain. It was a beast king to begin with, but at this moment, it exuded an invincible aura. Surrender? Don't joke around. Your bodies are the best food for me to replenish my energy, and with your current size, we can eat for a long time. As food, what right do you have to negotiate? The Golden Lion growled, its voice extremely cold. And quote, that's right. Food is food. After devouring the genes of so many flood dragons, I feel like I can easily crush you all. End quote. Wang Wen flicked his tongue and was extremely confident. As he spoke, his body was still rapidly growing. End quote. You destroyed the solar system and the Milky Way, and now you want to surrender? Caesar gritted his teeth and was extremely angry. Although he didn't have much feelings for those galaxies. No matter what, there were many things he had worked hard for there. Now that they were all destroyed, he was definitely not happy. Let's talk after we've eaten enough. The blood moon flapped its wings. But, under such circumstances, all the mutated beasts still focused their attention on Yi Bei. Yi Bei was the king of the snake tribe civilization. He was the one who had the final say in what to do. The three-bodied creatures could also sense the fury of the mutated beasts. At that moment, they didn't say a word and focused all their attention on Yi Bei, but they had already made up their minds. If the negotiations really fell apart, the fate of all the three-body creatures could be imagined. They would all become food. Even if he self-destructed, the energy could still be devoured by the mutated beasts. The outcome was too terrifying. At that time, they could only escape in all directions or directly throw themselves into the black hole and let their bodies be completely annihilated. Yi Bei's body was coiled up in the air. And NBSB, whoosh. His spiritual power domain enveloped the entire area. At a time like this, Yi Bei's logic was very clear. The three-body creatures had already surrendered. If they were to tear them apart now, the final result would definitely force the three-body creatures into a corner. In the end, they would only lose a large amount of food for no reason. If he changed his way of thinking, the result would be different. He would temporarily accept the surrender of these three-body beings, and if he could make use of them, he would subdue some of them. When there was an opportunity, he would let these creatures reproduce wildly. This way, they could provide an endless source of food for the entire mutant beast race. Sometimes, they could even become a major fighting force for the snake civilization. At this thought, Yi Bei immediately made a decision. All of you shut up. His voice was transmitted to the minds of every mutated beast through his mental power, and they instantly quieted down. When Golden Lion, who was the fiercest, looked at Yi Bei, he lowered his head and didn't even dare to breathe loudly, afraid that he would anger Yi Bei. End quote. This is the era of civilization. Our snake civilization is more advanced and greater than the human civilization. The tri-body civilization has surrendered, and we have no reason to refuse. End quote. Yi Bei said very seriously. It was just that. At this moment, he didn't even notice when he said such words. Yes, my king. Yes. Yes. The mutated beasts did not dare to object and responded one after another. The three-body creatures also heard Yi Bei's words, and all of them were overjoyed. However, Yi Bei unceremoniously diluted their joy. End quote. End quote. However, surrendering is one thing, but you still have to pay the price. The tri-body civilization destroyed our Milky Way, so from today onwards, the entire centaurs will be ceded to us, the snake race. End quote. In addition, every three-body life form must offer their body as food before they die. In addition, the number of three-body life forms must be controlled. If the number exceeds the limit, they will be treated as food. There's also one more point. When the snake civilization encounters an enemy in the future, the three-body life form must be at the forefront and hand over all their technology. End quote. Yi Bei's words were extremely domineering. The mutated beasts were a little depressed at first, but after hearing Yi Bei's words, their eyes lit up even more. How was this preferential treatment for prisoners? This was clearly rearing the three-bodied civilization as food. When they were in danger, they even treated these guys as vanguards and sent them to their deaths. They even took away all the technology of this civilization. This method was even more ferocious than directly devouring all the three-body life forms. However, most of the three-body life forms could only accept it with tears in their eyes in order to survive for a short time. We agree. As long as I can survive. No objections. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World, site only. And quote, then, can we make those monsters? No, make the creatures of the snake civilization stop devouring? The voices of the three-body creatures were rather weak. And quote, all of you stop. You've just devoured part of the worm dragon's genes, and it's time for you to start evolving. Since the three-body creatures have submitted, each of them is the size of a planet. Go to the surface of their bodies and evolve. Also, during the process of evolution, learn all the scientific and technological knowledge of the three-body civilization. End quote. Yi Bei ordered decisively. After devouring the worm dragon's gene, he was already somewhat impatient to transform into a WYRM. He was very clear that this transformation would definitely take a very long time. Therefore, he had to explain all the problems clearly. Evolution. The mutated beasts naturally had no objections. After devouring a portion of the worm dragon's genes, not only did their body strength get an unprecedented increase, but almost every mutant beast felt that their bodies were about to evolve. Yes. Yes. The mutant beasts replied. They also wanted to find a quiet place to start their evolution. However, some of the mutated beasts were slightly uneasy as they answered. And quote, King, if you go and evolve as well, we might be in danger when we're in those three-body life forms. What if they take the initiative to cause trouble at that time? Caesar was very direct. He did not care that these words were heard by the three-body creatures. As for the three-body creatures, they all trembled violently after hearing what Caesar said. They wanted to explain and express their stance, but they didn't know how to say it. After all, they were all high-intelligence creatures. What Caesar said might really happen. But, just as the atmosphere in the Centaur constellation turned a little cold, Yi Bei spoke very calmly. Don't worry. These three-bodied creatures won't dare to act recklessly unless they all want to die. Yi Bei was very confident. Walalala. As soon as the voice fell, the living tree floating in space began to dance. The flowers that were blooming on the tree began to bear huge fruits at a speed visible to the naked eye. Those fruits were dark black in color. Each of them had reached more than 10 meters. It looked like a small planet. However, when the fruits were born, all the mutated beasts could feel a terrifying aura. The three-body creatures were even more uneasy. And quote, do it, living tree. Remember, plant seeds on every three-body life form, but don't sprout them for the time being. Just place them on top. If they dare to act recklessly, just devour all the three-body life forms. End quote. Yi Bei spoke again. His voice was extremely cold. He was entrenched in the void and transmitted his words through his spiritual power. All the mutated beasts and three-body creatures heard him clearly. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. And when Yi Bei gave this order, the huge, living tree's vines began to shake wildly in the air. It continued to spin and accelerate. After those fruits appeared, under such acceleration, they instantly shot out with a whooshing sound. Moreover, when those fruits left their mother's body, each of them actually carried a trace of self-consciousness and scattered in different directions of the three-body life. Boom, boom, boom. Soon, another loud noise was heard. The fruit of the living tree smashed onto the three-bodied creatures, making a loud, crashing sound. And this was not the key. When the fruits landed on the surface, they seemed to come to life and quickly burrowed into the fruit, then acted as if nothing had happened. Yi Bei's voice rang out again. I'm sure all of you know how powerful the universe tree is. Its seeds have been implanted into your bodies. If anyone dares to betray it, with a slight thought from me, you will all become nutrients for the new universe tree. End quote. In addition, everyone from the snake civilization, you can now rest assured. End quote. Yi Bei flicked his tongue out. He only spoke after he saw that all three-body life forms had been implanted into the fruit of the living tree. The mutated beasts no longer had any objections to this method. As for those three-body life forms, They felt as if a terrifying seed had been planted in their bodies. At this moment, they immediately retracted all the bad thoughts in the depths of their hearts. He was afraid. He was really scared. To them, the universe tree was more terrifying than the flood dragon to a certain extent. End quote. All right, you guys can go ahead and evolve in peace now. End quote. Yi-Bei continued. Yes, my king. Yes. The mutated beasts quickly dispelled all their worries and rushed to the surface of the three-body life form, ready to evolve. The three-body life forms had the opportunity to attack when the mutated beasts quieted down, but under the threat of the universe tree seed, they didn't dare to fight back. When the mutated beasts were ready to evolve, all the three-body life forms absorbed energy crazily in space to strengthen the defense on their surface. Protect the mutated beasts. 10 minutes later, all the mutated beasts in the universe found their own three-body life forms and began to evolve. End quote. Living tree, you can also guard this universe by yourself. If you can absorb energy and become stronger, then absorb it. End quote. When the mutated beasts began to evolve, Yi-Bei finally turned his gaze to the living tree. He had originally planned to bring the living tree to the forest of death, but after seeing the living tree's current condition, he pondered for a few seconds before saying decisively. The living tree at the moment looked really powerful. Its total height was at least 3 million meters. Countless vines swayed in the universe. The most special thing about this living tree was that it had countless roots. Each root was like a living tentacle, constantly twisting in the void and absorbing all the energy that could be absorbed. In fact, even Yi-Bei's massive body appeared extremely tiny in front of the living tree. If it weren't for the fact that he could implant his consciousness into a living tree through his mental power domain and control it at will, Yi-Bei would even have a faint illusion that if he allowed the living tree to continue evolving and obtain higher intelligence, with the power of this living tree, he might not be a match for it even if he evolved into a flood dragon. But it was all good now. The living tree really did have the terrifying might of the legendary cosmic tree. It also listened to Yi-Bei's orders 100% and would never betray him, allowing it to continue evolving. This meant that it wouldn't be long before Yi-Bei would have a helping hand on par with the Serpent God battleship. In fact, it might even surpass the Serpent God battleship and become the most powerful existence. Walalala. Upon hearing Yi-Bei's order, the living tree rustled its vines as a response to Yi-Bei. Chi. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World, site only. Forest of Death, open. At that moment, Yi-Bei gave another order. As soon as he finished speaking, a huge vortex immediately appeared in front of him. Without any hesitation, Yi-Bei immediately plunged into the vortex. But when he returned to the Forest of Death, a hint of shock appeared in his eyes. He was busy fighting the three-bodied creature and the flood dragon, so he didn't pay attention to the situation here. The Forest of Death had suffered a terrible impact, and the incomparably huge energy wreaked havoc. That energy actually brought great benefits to the living trees.
Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, please like, share, and subscribe.